When I have the person who maybe they're like kind of halfway to their goal, they're saying things to me like, well, I've learned so much from you. I'm coming up on the end of 6 months of working together and you've really taught me a lot. And maybe they've lost a couple pounds, or maybe they truthfully haven't really seen any progress. This is where I, as a coach, just have to say sometimes I wish you well and I wish you nothing but the best. But it's really hard for me, if I'm being honest, not to bite my tongue. We collect a lot of data. We look at your weight. We look at your adherence to your macros. How consistent was your nutrition over the course of the 6 months that we were together? We look at your hunger cues. We look at all of your biofeedback. We're looking at your digestion, your stress levels, all of it. I find that the people who are saying to me that they've learned a ton and they feel like they can do it on their own, if I go back and I look through their data on a monthly basis, I cannot find more than a 6-week sprint to where they were very consistent. 6 weeks, unfortunately, is not enough to get you where you want to go. But more importantly, 6 weeks is not enough because 6 weeks is not going to be you're still doing it, right? You're still showing up. And the people with the most success see that because they go through those 6 months, and I can point through months and months at a time where they're nailing it. But what good is that if you don't do anything with it? And just having a coach also isn't doing something with it, because I can't do the work for you.
Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hello, FYX listeners. Welcome to our latest episode of the FYX podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and I've got a solo episode for you all today. I'm very excited because I'm recording from or in front of my brand new camera, set it up in my apartment. Shout out to my amazing editor who knows that I can't do this without him, Tony. And I've got a good one for you guys today. At least I think so. And this is something that has kind of come up for me in the last 2 weeks through client check-ins, really similar to the last solo episode I did, just kind of taking these in real life experiences from current Fitness FYX clients, this one maybe even from potential clients, and is more likely to speak to somebody who has not yet made the decision to hire a coach, even though they recognize that they want to make changes. Or the complete other end of the spectrum. You've been working with a coach, you've tried various diets, and you feel like you've gotten to a point where maybe you've seen a little bit of progress. Truthfully, maybe you haven't really seen much progress. And similarly to this first person, you are also frustrated. However, you keep making this statement that you have learned a lot and you understand what to do. You say things like, I know what to do. However, it's followed by a but. It's usually a but, I'm still not seeing the results that I want. I understand what I should be eating, but I'm still not making that happen. And I think the best way to sum this up is the following. You have learned and you understand the value of knowledge, but you have a disconnect with execution. You can learn all you want, but that doesn't mean you are qualified to execute, or it means that there are roadblocks coming up for you that are preventing you from executing on the tasks that you need to commit to see results on a daily basis. And the more I sat with this, and I will walk through a few examples throughout the rest of this episode, but I started thinking about different analogies of how this might apply to other things in your life. And the first thing that came up for me was the idea that you go to college for one degree and you pursue one path from the education side of things, but then maybe you take a completely different career path. So for those of you who don't know my story, maybe go back a couple episodes where I actually shared a podcast recording that I did with a few friends where I was the guest and I walked through how the hell I got here. But I have somewhat of a non-linear path or non-traditional path in that I went to school for journalism. naturally this podcast is an area where I 100% use the skills that I developed there. But I'm not a traditional news reporter. I do, setting up the camera, even though I just mentioned that I need help with it, being in front of the microphone, being behind a camera, working on marketing, social media, all those things. I 100% can say that I've had an advantage through what I chose to pursue my degree in versus somebody who maybe went to school for exercise physiology. But I've also worked in finance. So I can say that the analogy that I'm going for here is like, you went to school for one thing and you don't necessarily use it, right? It's like taking all this education and then not necessarily applying it. I think I can make a pretty solid argument. I think I did just make a pretty solid argument for why I do in fact use a lot of the skills that I did acquire in college and put them into practice. And it's not just knowledge that's sitting inside my brain that I'm not using. Maybe an even better example would be the idea of me sitting in front of this camera, or however you're listening to me, you hearing me through your car or through your headphones, and mentioning to you all the things that I know about nutrition, all of the tools, why we think protein's important, when you should be consuming carbohydrates, what are the best type of workouts for you to do, and me not actually using those tools and using that information. And guess what? I do that a lot. It's usually because I have other things that I decide are more important. A lot of times it's this podcast. A lot of times it's growing the business. A lot of times it's serving our clients. But I know myself, and I know that having a coach, at least for me, one of the reasons that I have a coach is because I see the value in the accountability. I have the knowledge. I've even had people ask me, why do you have a coach? You know a lot of these things. I do think there's always something new to learn. And I think it's important to get other perspectives. But my number one reason for having a coach is because it makes it that much easier for me to execute, because I know somebody is taking a look at my shit. It's that simple. I know someone is going to creep on my food tracker. I know I have someone to report into on a regular basis. It's the same reason why I have a business coach. It gives me structure. It also helps me have a game plan for how I can create that structure by myself in the moments when I choose to not necessarily continue that relationship. However, what I think is very interesting is, going back to how I started this whole thing, is the fact that most people who feel like they have as much knowledge as possible are the ones who leave the coach and frankly do the worst with continuing to execute on their own. How do you know if this is you? Well, if you're sitting here saying to yourself, I'm not super happy with the way I look, and I'd really like to make some changes to my physique, and I'm going to start tomorrow because I know what I need to do. I should just start eating more protein. I should just start eating more vegetables. Here's the easiest way that you can assess how successful you're going to be with that. Today is Thursday. Reevaluate on Sunday. Perfect timing, because the weekends are usually where people tend to slip. And the weekends are usually where it's a lot easier for people to come up with some of the excuses that we listed in our last solo episode, where it's a lot easier to be tempted by the fact that one of your friends wants you to go out to eat. And even though you know that you need to get some more protein into your day, that Mexican and the chips and the guac and all those things sound so much tastier that you're not really concerned about the chicken that should probably be included in that meal, and you will just go ahead and start on Monday. Now, maybe you give yourself a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. It's a holiday week that we're coming off of if you're listening to this episode right when it comes out. And then you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to try on Monday. Keep inventory of how many times you do that over a course of a month. Keep track of how many days, hopefully it's weeks, that you continue to put into place and live out what you're saying you're going to do. Because there's a really big difference between what you say you're going to do and what you actually do. Hopefully there's not a really big difference. Ideally, the reason why you're listening to this, and hopefully the benefit that you might get from working with a coach, is to bring alignment to those two things. Is to bring alignment to three things, actually. It's to bring alignment to how you're showing up right now, the person you want to become, and the steps that you actually need to take to get there. It's matching your words with your actions, right? Because talk is cheap. You can say all the things that you're going to do. And again, you can say, oh, I've read all the books. Other times I feel like people can equate this to like analysis paralysis. It's an example that comes up so much with entrepreneurship, or even I just think professionally. Let's say you wanted to switch careers or just switch to a new job, and you say like, yeah, I'm really not loving my current job, or I really want to start my own business. And you do things like buying certain books or listening to lots of different podcasts or starting to research or maybe networking a little bit with other people in the field that you want to go into. But then what happens when it comes time to actually starting the business, having an opportunity where somebody's standing in front of you at, let's say you're really great at, I don't know, let's say you're really great at interior design, and somebody is asking for your expertise and your opinion, and you continue to just give that information out for free. That's your chance. And if you don't execute on that, you will not become the person who starts the business. Or, you network with all these people, you say you want to switch your career paths, you'll look up the jobs and potential new positions, but you don't actually pull the trigger in applying for them. That is a complete misalignment in what you say you want versus what you're actually doing. And again, you might have all the knowledge, right? Like you could feel confident that you could present yourself in that interview, or that you could curate the perfect Pinterest board for the person who is looking to have their house redesigned or wants to redo their kitchen, and they saw your kitchen and they loved it so much and they want their kitchen to look a lot like yours. But until you go that next step, you haven't actually made the transition. And let's call it, in this case, you're missing the opportunity to be successful. Let's bring that back to the fitness journey. Let's bring that back to the nutrition journey. You're leaving on the table the opportunity for you to lose more body fat, the opportunity for you to fit into that dress that you really want to wear, the opportunity to put on some muscle, fill in the blank for whatever goal that you have. Now, I mentioned at the top of the recording that I see different buckets of people who express this whole idea of really knowledgeable, but really lacking in the execution side of things. And it happens at different phases in your journey. I mentioned the phase of the person who maybe they kind of like shop around for different coaches or try lots of different programs. And then they get to a point where they're not necessarily sure what they're looking for. And I have a ton of respect for those people for being inquisitive. But here's where you could start to lose respect. If you complain that you're not seeing the results that you want. Because again, misalignment with your execution versus what you're saying you really want. Do you have a right to actually be frustrated? Like, you can learn all the things you want to learn, but if you're not doing anything with it, do you really have the right to be frustrated? And if you know yourself and you know you're the person, like I'm saying with my example of why I have a coach in the first place, I know that I appreciate that level of accountability. And I know that I'm that much more successful when I have that person to report into. So why not continue to operate in an environment like choosing a coach that's going to actually help you make that happen? Now, the second half of this is that it's usually these people who tend to stop and frankly quit for a little while. And they say, oh, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do this on my own. And hear me when I say this. I want all of our clients to graduate our program and leave their experience from the Fitness Fix and not necessarily have to come back to us. How do I define success for our clients is getting that text message a year. I said 1 year later, where they're like, hey, it's another season. Like maybe let's fast forward. Let's say we started working with somebody a year ago and they finished the program a year later, or let's say we worked with them 2 years ago to make this really linear. And I get a text from them. It's now summer of 2023. We wrapped up our work together maybe in like September of 22. And it's now summer of 2023. If they're texting me being like, I feel just as great in my swimsuit as I did last summer, or I put on this dress that I wore last summer and I loved how it fit me and I still love how that fits me, That is the definition of true success from my perspective as a coach. Because that means why? Because that means that the behaviors that the person committed to in the time that we were working together, they value them so much and they consider them so important that they've continued to double down on them over the course of the last year. And they're also probably just a lot easier for them to do. And you know why it's a lot, and you know how I know that it's a lot easier for them to do? Because they're still doing it a year later. That's representative of the fact that they've made this a lifestyle. So when I have the person who maybe they're like kind of halfway to their goal, and again, they're saying things to me like, well, I've learned so much from you. You know, I'm coming up on the end of 6 months of working together, and you've really taught me a lot. And maybe they've lost a couple pounds, or maybe they truthfully haven't really seen any progress. This is where I, as a coach, just have to say sometimes I wish you well and I wish you nothing but the best. But it's really hard for me, if I'm being honest, not to bite my tongue. And I have to bite my tongue sometimes, because those are usually the people who they can say they've learned a lot. But if we go back, and the great part is about coaching with us is we can be objective as hell, because we collect a lot of data. We look at your weight. We look at your adherence to your macros. How consistent was your nutrition over the course of the 6 months that we were together? We look at your hunger cues. We look at all of your biofeedback. We're looking at your digestion, your stress levels, all of it. How was your intensity with your workouts? Everything. How many times did you go out to eat on a regular basis? How many drinks you were having? I could keep going, but you get the point. I find that the people who are saying to me that they've learned a ton and they feel like they can do it on their own, if I go back and I look through their data on a monthly basis, I cannot find more than a 6-week sprint to where they were very consistent. 6 weeks, unfortunately, is not enough to get you where you want to go. But more importantly, 6 weeks is not enough, because 6 weeks is not going to be the rest of your life. So if you can only do it for 6 weeks, and yes, there's varying degrees to which we're saying you can quote unquote do it, right? Certain things are going to become a little less structured, let's say. Maybe you're not tracking everything you're consuming. Maybe you're weaning off your food tracking by only focusing on a protein goal. Or maybe you're setting something up where you kind of eat the same breakfast and lunch every single day, but then you leave dinner as a little bit of a wild card, and you're still monitoring things, right? Like you're still paying attention to your weight. You're still pushing yourself in the gym. You're sticking to a consistent workout routine. You're prioritizing getting steps in. Maybe you're not religiously looking at your watch and being like, oh, I have to get 10,000 steps today. But at the very least, you're saying to yourself, hey, I have a break in between meetings. I'm going to jump outside. I'm going to get 20 minutes of a walk in, or it's a rainy day, but I'm still going to hop on the treadmill at the gym to get a few extra steps in because I was pretty much sitting behind my computer all day. You're still doing it, right? You're still showing up. Again, that takes more than those 6 weeks to really develop. And the people with the most success see that because they go through those 6 months, and I can point through months and months at a time where they're nailing it and things are going in the direction they want it to go because they're showing up and doing it. It's not, oh, I kind of sort of hit my protein this weekend, and then the next weekend I didn't hit it at all. And then the next weekend after that, I really didn't hit it, but then the next week I did. There's your problem right there, smack in front of your face. And arguably, that person, if they're inside of our program and they're showing up to our group coaching calls, they're asking questions of their coach on a regular basis, they're communicating with us, they're listening to podcasts like this one, they're listening to other podcast resources that I send them, they're following along with us on social media, they're gathering a lot of knowledge, right? Again, the examples of learning more about protein, understanding how to time their workouts. I think you guys get that point. But what good is that if you don't do anything with it? And just having a coach also isn't doing something with it, right? Because I can't do the work for you. And that's a shift I've actually really learned as a coach, I would say, even in the last year, especially in training my team and mentoring them as a coach and showing them what it takes to empower a client to be successful on their own. Listen, for those of you who are out there and are listening to this as a potential client, I want you to know that in me wishing you to be as successful as possible of this program. In me, let's fast forward to you being that person I just described who finished up with me in September of 2022 and now it's summer 2023 and they feel great. If you want to be that person, I want that for you too, but I want you to know you already have the ability to do it and you're going to get there with a little bit of guidance from me. Yes, I'm there for the moral support. Yes, I'm there to help you navigate social settings and kind of talk you through that situation. But if I wanted to pinpoint somebody's success and like the characteristics that they need to be successful, it's them recognizing within 6 to 8 weeks of them working with us that we now are there to empower you to be able to answer a lot of your questions on your own, because it'll also give you confidence to do this. And that part of the formula is really, really important. Because if you don't have the confidence to do it, it turns into sending me lots of messages every time you feel like you're in a sticky situation. And there's nothing wrong with that. But my clients who have been with us for a minute know that as we start to move through the program, I get a little strategic about how frequently or quickly, I should say, that I'll respond to something. I've even seen clients send me a few messages in a row. Message number 1, they tell me about the scenario. And then by message number 2, they actually walk me through, oh, wait, I know what to do. Never mind. Here's what I'm thinking. This, and this. I love that because that is their brain working. I appreciate that they're communicating to me. I appreciate them spelling out their thought process via that message because it reinforces to me as the coach that it's clicking for them. The way they're thinking about food, the way they're thinking about their day fitting together is finally clicking for them. And that's awesome. But for whatever reason, and I don't know if you're listening to this and as you reflect on this episode, if you have any thoughts, I'd be very curious to those of you who are listening to this. If you've been that person who feels like, okay, I know what I need to do, but now I just actually have to do it, and you haven't done it, what did it take for you? Like, what did it take for you to finally crack that code? Maybe it's getting to a point of where you're just like, I'm really sick of, and so frustrated. I'm just sick of my own shit. And I'm so frustrated that I'm willing to do anything. And maybe I need to take a look in the mirror and recognize that it is me and my choice of not doing as much as I possibly could with said information. I think that's the big one, but maybe there's something else to it. Maybe let's play devil's advocate together. I'd love to hear some other opinions on this. Now, the other area where this came up, as I mentioned, with kind of like program shopping or doing a lot of research on your own, has a lot to do with situations where I meet potential clients who have had what they feel like is success in the past, but then maybe some other like roadblocks came up their life, like different life situations, or the approaches that they took just don't really apply to them anymore. They went through different life events, their hormones have changed. There's so many different things that could possibly come up. But usually those people, I think the people who have gathered all of this knowledge, they feel a little bit stuck. And I had this conversation the other day and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was really informative and I felt like the potential client agreed. Is the feeling of stuckness is coming from the fact that your goal has shifted and you don't know how to create a new goal. Like you're kind of talking yourself out of a goal a little bit. And I'll just give a little more context with this exact example of a conversation I had just the other day. The person said to me, I don't know if the expectations that I have for myself now into my 50s, I don't know if they're realistic. Like at this point of my life, should I just be saying to myself, I am happy with the way I look? Because it wasn't like she was totally unhappy with the way she looked, but she felt like for the effort she was putting in, she deserved a little bit more of an outcome. And in my eyes, for that reason, the effort she was putting in should not be dismissed. Because that's a person who's really going for it. That's a person who isn't looking for the quick fix. They're looking to get that additional information and frankly are confused because there's just so much information out there that is often conflicting. I could say one thing, the next coach could say something else, and then you don't really know how to discern that. So I also think that's a responsibility of a coach too. And that's something that I pride myself on. I would say that's the biggest education piece we try to emphasize inside of the Fitness Fix, is just like cutting through the noise and helping people get through the BS so you can focus on the things that do truly matter and move the needle most, but move the needle most under your circumstances in your life, with whatever constraints you might have on that, with balancing kids, stress, work, other relationships, injuries, preferences with certain types of food choices, dietary restrictions, whatever. So anyways, this person had kept saying to me, like, maybe it's possible that what I desire at this point, like, am I being a little too picky almost, or are my expectations way too high? And I don't think that's true. I don't think there's a reason for you to say to yourself your expectations are too high. What I think we have to come around to the idea of is that a lot of this is a little bit of experimentation. And I shouldn't say a little bit. It is experimenting. We have to assess how your body is going to respond to different protocols. Do we have like general guidelines that we follow? Of course, there are certain parameters. Easy one to kind of get to speak to this is, I don't really care who you are, you need 100 grams of protein. If I know nothing else about you, I can promise that you need 100 grams of protein. But we might need to refine the way that we're going to get there. Or you might do a little bit better on a slightly higher fat and lower carb set of macros, and the next person might do better on the exact opposite. The next person might do really well with a lot more carbs, maybe because of the way that they're working out. And I think a lot of times when people are looking at different programs or trying to figure out what to do next, that starts to get to what I call like a little bit in the weeds. And in my experience, I don't always have the opportunity to take our clients that far. And that's for two reasons. One is because they only give it 6 months and maybe they reach a goal and then they don't even think about that we haven't scratched the surface. And there's so much more that we can explore. And there's new goals that they can set for themselves to be able to look at their fitness a little bit differently, to be able to look at the way they're eating a little bit differently, to be able to get a little bit pickier about, okay, what are our food sources that we're choosing from? How often are we making decisions to go out to eat? How much does estimating with our macros affect the outcome that we're going to see? I don't get into that with somebody who's brand new and doesn't even know what the heck a macro is, because that would totally scare that person away. They'd feel very defeated. And again, we want to build your confidence, and we want you to understand that sometimes your level, even if you think you have the knowledge, if you haven't executed on it at all, I'm still going to consider you a novice. You're still going to be considered a beginner. Show me that you can hit those basics, and then I will actually get into the weeds with you a little bit more. Show me for 6 months that you can hit those basics. And I guarantee you, because I'm guilty of this too, is once you start to hit the basics, if you kind of let the basics go, you grasp at straws and look for the nitty gritty. You look for other things to kind of pick on and be like, oh, well, yeah, the reason why the scale's been going up, it's not because I changed my macros, or excuse me, it is because we changed my macros. And, it has nothing to do with the fact that maybe I only got like 6 hours of sleep the last 2 nights, or it's because we changed my numbers. It's not because I went out to eat like 6 times this week and I usually only go out to eat twice. Those are the basics, the going out to eat, the tweaking of the amount of sleep you're getting. That stuff doesn't go away. As you get more information, you do not have the right to just simply forget about those things and not put them into practice. You're actually making it harder on yourself when you choose to ignore those things and you start to look for other reasons. You start to look for, usually it's external. I think a lot of those times we're looking for something that's outside of ourselves because we don't really want to put the blame on the choices that we made. We don't want to take responsibility for the choices that we made when we know, since we're claiming we have all this knowledge, when we know that we need to continue to focus on these things no matter what, no matter how we're feeling. And I think that's the hard part, because a lot of this can be very emotional. And again, not to dismiss our emotions, but sometimes we got to be a little bit more black and white about it. So to kind of close the loop on this example of the person who felt like they had gained so much knowledge and had been willing to experiment over the years, one thing I pointed out to her in our conversation was, this just might take some time. And now that you've established that you're not really sure where to go next, we need to figure out where your goals were. And what I really appreciated was that she had awareness to recognize that she didn't really know what her goal was. And that's okay. And she wanted to know what type of goal setting and work we would do around setting goals inside of our program. And what I shared with her was the fact that I love that she was bringing that up before we even got started, because something that a lot of people don't necessarily realize until they're a couple months in, and we actually just did a training on this a few weeks ago with our one-on-one clients, is that your goals can shift, and that's okay. But sometimes we just don't know how to spot that. And that's the responsibility of your coach to maybe get a little bit ahead of you and say, hey, have you noticed that these couple of things are going on? You've been reporting to me that you're feeling a lot more stressed. You got some things going on at home, at work. Can we maybe shift our goals away from having to get into the gym 5 times a week over to programming more walks and taking more time to recover, and maybe adding in some basic breathing exercises, being able to take a step back and zoom out because you're in your day-to-day and sometimes you miss things like that. So bringing it all together, these different people or different types of people having these different realizations of, hey, I have the knowledge. Cool. Awesome. I'm so glad you feel like you've learned a lot. That is a big goal of something we do with our clients. I had a client just yesterday say to me, hey, you're increasing my protein. I meant to ask you why. I love that. I want to tell you exactly why I'm increasing your protein. And the answer should never be just because your coach told you to do it. For context, the reason why we might increase protein as somebody's moving through our program is because as you ultimately enter a calorie deficit where you're consuming fewer calories, we want to bring our protein up because that is going to keep you the most full. It helps the most with satiety of all 3 of those macronutrients, and it helps us maintain muscle. And for all you ladies out there who want to be lean and toned, what you're actually saying is that you want to build muscle, and consuming less calories makes it that much harder to do that. But the protein at play preserves the muscle that you do have. So that's why we do it. But I love when clients ask that. Education is important. Knowledge is important. It gives you power. You know that saying, knowledge is power. But if you want results, then you got to do something about it. So to bring this all the way back to my very first suggestion, how do you know if this is you? I feel like if you dig a little bit deeper and you've been listening to this and you feel a little bit called out, I think you know it's you. But if you want to test it and you want to decide and maybe assess if something might be missing in your equation for building up your success, try it. Like I said, if you're listening to this live, it's a Thursday, you're listening to it on the day that it comes out, you got the weekend. It's a great time to test this. You know that you need to do things like get protein in every single meal. Will you do it? Take the next 3 days. If you eat 3 times a day, right, in the next 3 days, you're looking at 9 meals. Did you get protein at all 9 of those meals? If you got it at 7, awesome, great. It's pretty solid. But if you got it at 3, and you're saying to yourself, well, I'll try that again on Monday, how many more Mondays are you going to keep doing that? Stop stopping and keep going, because if you keep going, you're showing yourself you can do it. You're also giving yourself a taste of the lifestyle that is required of you to maintain whatever results you're looking for on the other side. So with that, from wherever you're listening from, hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And before I officially let you go, don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, would so appreciate if you could share it, but would also appreciate some love by leaving a 5-star rating and review on whichever platform you listen on. Most of you out there tend to use Apple Podcasts to tune into the Fix, so scroll all the way down to the very bottom of this episode or of the show and all previous episodes, and you'll see a bunch of stars. Click all 5. If you have any specific feedback, you can leave your comments there too, but the more ratings we get for the show, the more people are likely to be referred to it, so we can help spread the word on the Fix, and would really appreciate if you guys could go ahead and do that. Catch you guys next time.